AudioModern have just released their brand new plugin, Loopmix. Now I've had my hands on this plugin for the last couple of months because AudioModern asked me to do the tutorial videos for it. If you want to see those videos, I'll link them up there. I go into every single feature and how to use it. But in this video, I wanted to kind of show you some of my favorite features and how it's kind of finding its way into my workflow and how I use it. So just for this video, I put together a really simple beat, just a kick, clap, hat, and some Rhodesy kind of pianos. So it's kind of at this point where I might start getting Loopmix involved. Now Loopmix is dead easy to use. All you need to do is create a new Midi track and drag and drop it on it. So what is Loopmix? Well, it's basically a plugin where you can layer up to 6 different loops. Doesn't matter what those loops are, drums, vocals, synths, whatever you want to bring into it. And then you can use the random features to kind of cut up those loops and use different portions of those loops. And then kind of also do some really kind of interesting stuff with them. You can see here we have this kind of grid with different layers on here. The numbers down here represent the 6 different loops that you can import. So for example, I've got a whole load of tops loops, drums, top loops. And what I can do is I can drag and drop these into the various lanes within here. I'm going to bring a few more in. So I've now got 6 loops in there. Nothing's going to happen yet because nothing is actually playing. You can see all these kind of loops are kind of grayed out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the random feature at the top here to randomize the selection of those loops. So if I hit the random button here, you'll see certain parts in here all kind of light up. So where it's lit up, that means those parts of the loops are being played. Now it's actually playing back at half time at the moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to play back in real time. It's not quite right, so I'm actually going to speed it up a little bit more. Sometimes it doesn't quite get the speed of the loops that you import, but you can easily do that by adjusting the speed control here. And what I can do is I can hit that random button again until I get a kind of selection of the beats that I like. By the way, if you're liking Loopmix, it's actually on offer at the moment, almost 30% off. I'll put a link underneath this video to grab hold of that. So as you can see there, we're kind of getting chops of all 6 of those loops. And this is a really interesting way of using drum loops, for example, where you can use different bits of different loops and create your own kind of custom loop out of it. Now you don't actually have to just use that random button. You can actually just select the cells within here if you want to and choose different ones. So just by bringing in 6 drum top loops and then using some of the random features within Loopmix, I've got a completely kind of custom loop. And then I can start tweaking it from there. For example, I could put some EQ on there. I'll probably cut some of the bottom end out of that. And then maybe also tweak the transients as well. Let's see how that sounds over the top of this beat. You also don't have to use the whole of that sequence. For example, I can use this red bar here to just focus on maybe the first 2 bars of it. Not bad for something that's been kind of done randomly on the fly just for this video. There's loads of other stuff you can do within here as well. I've just been focusing on this sequencer, but there's loads of other tabs that allow you to do some really interesting stuff. For example, the Rearrange allows you to take different portions of the loop and put it elsewhere. So for example, maybe there's this bit here that I want to kind of put here. We've got the reverse tab here, which will allow you to reverse any of those blocks. You got the density, which allows you to kind of split these up and do like a kind of note repeat on some of these. And then we got the pitch tab, which allows you to pitch any one of those chops as well. And this is a really interesting one to use the random feature on. You've got the random feature at the top here, which allows you to randomize all of the sections. You can actually use the little random button here on each individual section. So this little kind of dice icon here allows you to just randomize that section. And you can do this with either shift, format, or shift and formats. Format sounds quite nice when you do it with drums. This can be really interesting if you're kind of making minimal house and you kind of want to get that kind of techie thing going with your synths and stuff, get them to kind of blip with every single 16th. This works really nice. But I think for this loop, I'm going to reset this. Another really cool feature of Loopmix are these keys down the bottom here. These represent your MIDI keyboard, and you can actually play the loops within Loopmix via your keyboard. So in C1 here, we can play the individual stems. And what this allows you to do is then use your kind of MIDI keyboard to kind of jam away and kind of cut the loops up in real time. And this makes it a really kind of fun way to kind of find which chops you want out of each one of those loops. And because it's MIDI, you can just record that MIDI in and then play it back a bit later. You can find that portion of that performance that you've done, just loop that up and use that. So that's really the first way I've kind of been using Loopmix within my projects, using it to create unique percussion loops based on samples within my sample library. And this works equally well with electronic drums as it does with acoustic drums. So you might be using it with some hi-hats, for example, pulling various hi-hats together and kind of comping them into something that's more unique, or maybe even taking some acoustic drums, so using some congas, some toms and things like that, and creating some really interesting kind of grooves. But another really interesting way I found of using it is actually using it with vocals. This is really interesting. So I'm going to drop Loopmix onto another MIDI channel within here. So this little idea that I'm working in is actually in G minor. And I pulled together a whole load of kind of vocal loops in G minor. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to drag and drop these into Loopmix.
Yeah. I'm falling. I want to feel you.
Just quite randomly. I'm not quite sure how this is going to turn out. And let's hit random and see what it comes up with. I'm not too keen on that density, so I'm actually going to clear that and remove that from the randomization. And in fact, I don't think I want the rearrange as well. Let's keep that off for now. I'm going to reset as well. You'll notice the loops keep changing with each kind of play over of these 4 bars. That's because these loops are kind of longer than the 4 bars within here, and what it's doing is it's kind of playing the first part and then the second part, or however many parts it needs to play through the whole thing. What you can do is turn trim on when it'll only play that certain part that's loaded at the moment. That's already sounding quite interesting. Let's see what it sounds like with the beat. It's all sounding quite interesting actually. Apart from this bit here, it's kind of not the right pitch, but again, I can jump into the pitch tab here and adjust it. can even go to the extreme and kind of almost pitch these up a whole octave if you wanted to. Again, I'll put a bit of EQ on that as well. Bit of reverb as well. And in fact, I've got a bit of sidechain going on with these Rhodes. I'm going to put that on here as well. I think that's already sounding pretty cool. That's sounding pretty good. But say you want to put a variation on that, but you don't want to kind of lose what you've got here. Well, this is kind of where the remixes come in. And this is a whole big feature. If you want to see how all this works, look at the tutorial videos. As I say, I'll link to it in the top right hand corner of the screen. But basically what this allows you to do is it allows you to save what you've got going on here and go between it and perform with it. So for example, this performance that I've got here, this sequence that I've got here, I can save this to C3. Just click on there and that's saved. And what I can now do is make some changes to it. So I've kind of got a variation there, and what I can do is I can save this on the next key and I can go between these two and just kind of perform with them. And of course, as I mentioned before, these are mapped to your MIDI keys. So you can go ahead and you can kind of play this with your MIDI keyboard, kind of perform it how you want it, and then record those MIDI notes in, and you've got all those changes and it's all ready to go. So that's Loopmix, or at least how I use Loopmix within my tracks. It's a really fun plugin to play around with. There's just so many possibilities, and it really makes good use of the loops that you've already got on your hard drive. You can combine up to 6 different loops and create something really unique every single time. And there's just so many more features to it. As I say, I did the tutorial videos for AudioModern. They are live on their YouTube channel right now. As I say, I'll link to it in the top right hand corner and also below as well. And also Loopmix is actually on offer, introductory offer at the moment, almost 30% off. So if you want to grab that, again, I'm going to put a link underneath this video to grab that exclusive offer. It's a brilliant little plugin. I definitely recommend playing around with it, having a go with it, because there's just so many possibilities and so many things you can come up with it.
Right now, I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.